Hey everybody, this is Jen. I was hoping to take an opportunity and talk with you a little bit about the process of governance with AVMA. And so the reason this kind of came up in my mind is I've had a lot of folks say to me, congratulations, super happy that you're running. I can't wait to see you as President-elect, and also how do I vote for you? And so what that brings up for me is a question of like, oh right, most folks don't actually, even if you're a member of AVMA, and even if you're a really active member of AVMA, you might not understand the process of like how you get selected and elected into the positions of officers or district directors or some of those types of positions you might be interested in running for yourself. And so I thought I would just take a step back and say, okay, so let me first talk about the fact that AVMA as a whole has over 40 like councils, committees, and trusts that you can volunteer on. And so if you are interested in doing something like that, those resources and opportunities are always available on the AVMA website. I think you go to like avma.org/volunteer opportunities, right? It's a pretty basic URL to keep track of. If you are running for a council position, those are elected by our House of Delegates, which I'll talk about here more in a minute. Whereas if you're running for a committee position, those are actually appointed by the AVMA Board of Directors. And the Board of Directors, I guess I'll also step back and say, those are probably those of us that are in the most visible roles, right? I've recently finished a term as the Vice President who does serve on the Board of Directors. Our Board of Directors includes our 5 officers, so our Vice President, our President-elect, our President, and our immediate past President. And then it also includes our Treasurer, right? So those are our 5 officers. And then there are 11 district directors. So if we look at the US as a whole, AVMA divides that geographically into 11 different districts. And I'm happy to show you this map. I definitely do not have them all memorized. I will tell you I know my district is District 5, and we have in our district Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Michigan. And so that makes up the district that my district representative represents. That is going to vary obviously a little bit based on where you're at in the country. But essentially know that you have someone serving on the Board of Directors that is representing your sort of regional perspective as an individual member or an individual member of a state association. Then if I say, okay, how do you get to these positions as officers? Well, I mentioned our House of Delegates is who votes for those. Well, who the heck are these House of Delegates? Well, if you've ever come to the spring, and by spring I mean winter technically, the January AVMA Veterinary Leadership Conference, this is always in conjunction with the winter House of Delegates meeting. And then the House of Delegates also meets again in the summer at the same time or immediately before the AVMA convention. The timing of that can vary a little bit because year to year convention is normally around July, but it can flex as early as June and it can go as late as August, right? That is a little bit dependent on the city we're going to and how the convention team organizes and structures that. And so these individuals that are on this house, there are 70 different organizations that are represented. So 50 of those are your different states. And so think about whatever state you reside in or that you spend your most time in. That is that state has a delegate and an alternate delegate that help to represent them. In addition to the 50 states, there are 20 allied groups. And so these are made of more, I don't know if niche is maybe the right word, more specialized organizations. So the American Association of Equine Practitioners, AAEP, the American Association of Feline Practitioners is in there, AHA, the SAVMA, which is the Student AVMA, those are all represented in that group of 20. That group of 20 is called the Allied Caucus. And so overall, the House of Delegates is made of 70 different sort of organizations that are represented by a delegate and an alternate delegate. Most of the time, it's the delegate that does the actual voting in terms of the button pushing, right? But they are having that conversation with their alternate and hopefully having that conversation with their larger organization as well. You know, and they're sometimes voting on topics of really interesting discussion and really could impact us nationally or even internationally in terms of the practice of veterinary medicine, public practice, private practice. There are a lot of different topics that come up that these guys deal with. I do want to say, so when we come to talking about officer elections, at least for the vice president and the president-elect is who essentially get elected by the House of Delegates, that happens every summer. So every summer we select a new president-elect, and every other summer we select a new vice president, because that's a 2-year term. And the way the votes are sort of determined is, you would think, right, like you've got 70 organizations, and so, you need to have more than half of that. Well, it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. So our House does have those 70 organizations, but the votes of the delegates are actually weighted. So it behaves a little bit more like an electoral college. And so, for example, if you think about Connecticut versus Illinois, or Florida versus West Virginia, right? There are states that have a larger population of veterinarians in them. And so that delegate actually has a more weighted or a more heavily weighted vote than those from smaller organizations. And so Connecticut, Rhode Island, those of us from small or small-ish states are not left out without a voice, but our voice is different than that of an individual from one of the larger state organizations. And so essentially, when it comes to July of 2025, I will be standing in front of this House of Delegates again, asking them to select me as the next president-elect. And if you are one of those delegates, then I would very much appreciate your vote. If you are not one of those delegates, but you're represented by someone who's a delegate there, I would encourage you to get in touch with them and talk to them and ask them, hey, who are we thinking of voting for and why? And how do I influence that? Because those are the places that most of us as individual contributing veterinarians and members of AVMA can have our voice heard. So if you're a student, you need to talk to National SAVMA. If you are an equine practitioner, talk to your delegate and your alternate from AAEP. If you are a small ruminant individual, there are, ASRP is in there as well. So any of those organizations you might belong to, and you might belong to more than one, right? Like you might be a part of your state association, and you might be part of your species group. I am a member of a few different state organizations because I practice in a few different states, and there are different things that happen when you cross those state borders. So I would encourage you to get out there, get your voice heard. I am excited. I'm overwhelmed by the possibility, and really looking forward to being able to represent AVMA and the profession of veterinary medicine on this national and international, even global sort of scale. And so I really do hope that I will succeed in winning this election in July of 25. And I, again, would just encourage you that if you have questions for me or topics that you think I need to be talking about, please just shout them out. Like I wanna know what's on your mind, right? It could be easy to just go in and sort of do the thing and read the page, but that's not what I'm here for, right? I'm here to be myself, and that's a little bit funny and a little bit quirky and a little bit off, a little bit off kilter sometimes, but I think always with positive intent behind it and a little bit of fun, right? I'm here to bring a little bit of humor, probably a decent amount of energy, and some excitement and enthusiasm to what we're doing. So if you think that I'm here to represent you, please tell your delegates. I can help you find those delegates if you don't know how to get a hold of them. And again, if you're thinking about what would this look like for me in the future to be a delegate from my state or to be on the board of directors, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to put you in touch with folks that are doing that now. And so I hope, although this was a little bit longer than I intended, I hope this demystifies and sort of explains a bit of how these elections happen and what our AVMA House of Delegates actually looks like. So would love to hear more from you. Tell me what's on your mind. And I'm really, really super looking forward to representing all of us. So thank you so much.